All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our day 2 of 75 years of the making of modern South Asia. Those of you who were with us yesterday, well, thank you for being here. And those who weren't, well, you missed a lot. The good news is that the eminent Salman has recorded everything. And Salman is the masked guy at the back. He's recorded everything, and so it'll be online. We basically had a lovely panel on climate change. As is our wont, we're represented by the scientists, the social scientists, environmentalists on the panel, and Jim Stock, our fearless leader for climate at the university, moderated the panel expertly. Then we had equally riveting and interesting, completely different spin for looking at the partition, the 1947 partition in particular, but also subsequent partitions in the subcontinent through the eyes of the arts. And we had people who work in all sorts of media, contemporary art, architecture and the built environment, film, just interpreting, and I mean, I've been, as a result of being in this role at the Mittal Institute, I've been steeped in this for the last 7-8 years, but I learned a lot from these alternative métiers. And then perhaps the tour de force was Professor Sen was kind enough to join us and gave effectively sort of an intellectual history of the region through his own lenses, introduced by the eminent Hitesh Hathi, who also did a lovely job of anchoring that. And it was nice of Professor Sen to join us and stay and converse with us over lunch. So day 2, unfortunately, we have a small glitch in the morning. Yesterday, we had a technological glitch. And today, we have a personal issue, which is Syed Babar Ali, unfortunately, just messaged us about half an hour ago as I was walking over, saying that there's an emergency, and so he's not able to join. But in true developing country, South Asian fashion, we adapted immediately. And we have at least 2 people online. Hitesh, 2? Do we have 3?
No, we have 2. And I just wanted to say, Babar Ali Saab just sent...
Oh, he sent the text.
He sent some brief remarks that he thought we might read. So
Okay.
you would like.
Where are the remarks? Okay. All right. I don't think I can do justice to this, but I will read it exactly as it is. So try to imagine that I'm Babar Sahib. I realize it's a huge mountain to climb, and something I would aspire to for many lifetimes. But with no disrespect intended, let me just read it exactly as it is verbatim. At that age, people grow old. I presume he's referring to 75. However, nations, begin to discover their human potential. Am I not reading at the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, rewind. It's too early in the life of any country to celebrate its 75th birthday. At that age, people grow old. Nations, however, begin to discover their human potential and find their place in the international community. My country, Pakistan, became alive on 14th August 1947. Until then, I, like millions of others, was a citizen of the Indian subcontinent. I happened to be in the United States at the time, studying at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Some 60 of us decided that we would jointly celebrate the creation of India and Pakistan. Divisions would be born later. Those who are now Indian used the tricolor flag of the Congress Party. They sewed Ashoka's chakra in its center. As there was no equivalent Pakistani flag, its design was announced some days before 14th August. I asked a fellow student, Kamla Chaudhary, to stitch a green and white flag for me. Even though our now discrete countries were created overnight and our cultural heritage halved, nevertheless, we students jointly celebrated the independence of the British with a common shared fervor. Our 2 flags flew proudly side by side. I'm getting emotional reading this. Such was the spirit in those early days. After completing my studies in the United States, I returned to Lahore to discover that most of my school and college friends, almost all of them Sikhs and Hindus, had migrated to India. I remained in touch with them, visiting them frequently as they crossed the new border to visit us. I am in my 96th year now, and even though many of those friends have passed away, my connections with India and other South Asian neighbors has never waned. I've been an active member of the Track 2 effort under the umbrella of the Balusa Group, which met to promote and improve relations between countries in political and economic areas. The United Nations helped set up the South Asia Center for Economic Policy, to which I contributed for almost 15 years. Initially based in New Delhi and later in Dhaka, shifted to Kathmandu. Mr. Muchkund Dubey, the former Foreign Secretary of India, and I served as co-chairs for over 10 years. I've been similarly closely associated with the activities of the Lakshmi, Mittal and family, South Asia Institute, Harvard University. Its mission to actively address issues of equity, sustainability, and livability are as timeless as they are urgent today. I know I speak for every citizen of each South Asian country when I say that we need to celebrate our independence, as we did 75 years ago, but also our interdependence. We have so much to learn from each other and to share in our pursuit for the well-being and happiness of our communities. I laud the efforts made over the years with the Mittal Institute to achieve these goals in a spirit of collaboration and brotherhood. That's it. Maybe a round of applause for Babar Sahab. I could not agree more. Let's leave it at that. Shall we introduce our... So we have two speakers. There's an impressive young lady, Mashail Malik, who is currently a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard. She was going to do the introduction of Babar Sahab, had he been able to join us. I didn't see any reason for her to introduce me, so we instead have asked her to make a few comments, particularly about what Babar Sahab meant to her and her generation in some ways. She's a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard and incoming assistant professor in the government department in Faculty of Arts and Sciences. She specializes in the political psychology of identity, and her book explores the micro-foundations of ethnic politics in Karachi, which sounds really interesting to me. And do we have Osman also? Also on is our very good friend and good friend to many in the room, Osman. Osman Mia, as I call him, has been a long-time supporter of, well, of me personally and of the Institute, and just an all-around classy guy. I think that's the best summary that I can offer of Osman. He is technically an industrialist, but really he's an art lover, more than an industrialist, and a philanthropist, and has a heart of gold. I think that's all that needs to be said for Osman. And he's closely associated with LUMS. He's in Paris, so I just dragged him out of his meeting and said, get in front of the screen. I gave him about 3 minutes to do it, and he's here, so which I think is the heart of gold. Thank you, Osman, and thank you, Mashail. Mashail, we'll go to you first. Maybe say whatever. Hold on a second. Let me ask my boss. How much time do we have?
We have about 15, 20 minutes.
We've got about 15, 20 minutes. I thought maybe, Mashail, you can say whatever comes to mind for 5 minutes or so, 5, 6 minutes, and then Osman, same thing, and then let's just open it up, see if anybody wants to add to this. We've got people from all over the subcontinent here, from Harvard, from other universities, and lots of people online. So, Mashail, over to you.
Thank you for the very kind introduction. So I'm just gonna wing it, but I would like to say a little bit about Babar Sahab, the remarks that I already had planned, just so the folks here kind of know, who would have been here today and who they got the remarks from through you. So, I was asked to introduce him. He sends his regrets, he can't make it today, but I'll talk a little bit about the significance of Babar Sahab to Pakistan's development. So Babar Sahab is one of Pakistan's most prominent business leaders and philanthropists. In both business and philanthropy, he has made too many contributions to Pakistan for me to list them all today, but I'll try and give a few choice examples. So on the business front, Babar Sahab helped set up Pakistan's first ever fertilizer company, which is a major achievement in a country where agriculture forms such an integral part of the economy. As a philanthropist, he's best known for founding one of Pakistan's most prestigious universities, the Lahore University of Management Sciences, or LUMS. So while LUMS began as a business school, it now educates Pakistani youth in law, engineering, science, and the liberal arts. I didn't get to go to LUMS, I really wanted to, but I ended up going abroad instead. But most of my friends, honestly, who have kind of made it in Pakistan, they went to LUMS. Babar Sahib is a great champion of higher education as a tool for social mobility. And that's reflected in LUMS's commitment to providing really generous scholarships to students from underprivileged backgrounds. He's also a champion of environmental protection and served previously as the international president of the Worldwide Fund for Nature. Finally, he's also served in the Pakistani government as a caretaker minister of finance. His achievements have been recognized and honored by institutions across the world. He's received honors from the governments of Sweden and the Netherlands, an Order of the British Empire, and an honorary doctorate degree from McGill University. He was also most recently elected as an international honorary member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Now, if he was here, I would ask you to give him a round of applause, but maybe we can do that anyway in his absence and he'll be able to see it later. Osman, over to you.
Osman?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Reza is also on.
Yeah.
So, आप जरा 5 मिनट में करके, then we'll hand off to Reza.
मैं 3 मिनट में करके can hand over to Reza because we have a lot more substance to talk about. But I think after that introduction and after what Babar said in his written comments, there's very little for me to add, except really try and echo some of what he said. As Tarun Bhai said, I am a, within brackets, failed industrialist, but I do have a love for the arts. And I think one of the wonderful things about our region is that it is just so rich in its heritage and culture. And despite 75 years of a divided geography, that is something both sides of the border share, and we continue to share. So whether it's music, whether it's the fine arts, we can continue to express our uniqueness, our originality in ways that our politics don't allow us to do. It's very unfortunate, and I do believe that despite this current stage of hyper-nationalism that we live in, particularly in our region, but in many regions of the world today, we can move on to an era where we can live together in peace and with the same pride that Baba Sahib mentioned, of two flags being hoisted side by side, and countries that have so much more in common than what divides us. We can enter an age of prosperity that we've never seen before. Having said that, I'm very proud to introduce my friend, Dr. Reza Baqir, who, as governor of the state bank, took over the Central Bank of Pakistan at a very, very difficult period in our history, and saw us not only through COVID, but through multiple economic challenges, and has paved the way for a transformation in the Pakistani economy, whether it's in industry or agriculture. And he's done tremendous innovative work that is extremely original. So without taking too much time from these proceedings, I would like Reza to speak a little bit about what he's done so far and where Pakistan stands today, despite its challenges, the hope that we all see.
Thank you, Osman. It is a great pleasure actually to be with all of you. And I was, when I was told about this event and, how it is also to also, welcome and celebrate all the contributions that Syed Babar Ali Sahib has made, I feel deeply honored to be part of this gathering. And it's really good to see many friends in the audience. Osman, thank you. Tarun, it's good to see you again. I see Mukesh is there. I see the name of Ali Asani in the participants. And if it's the same Ali Asani who was my advisor during my freshman year at Harvard, I am then absolutely floored to be part of this discussion. And of course, great to see Hitesh. Let me just say something about Babar Ali Sahib, Osman, and Tarun, if it's okay. And then I want to talk a little bit about Pakistan and some of the recent ways in which I think Pakistan has changed. And particularly, I want to talk briefly about Pakistan's COVID journey, which to me illustrates many things. About 3 years ago, I had quit my job at the IMF to come and do public service and take up a position in the central bank. And in the very first few months, I had the occasion to see Babar Ali Sahib again. In fact, Osman had first introduced me to him. And I still remember what he told me. I think what he told me then was something that anchored me throughout my 3 years as a central bank governor. And he told me right from the get-go, immediately cutting through the chase, that never, ever compromise on your principles. And as a central bank, when you feel something independent needs to be done, do not let political considerations sway you the other way. And do not be afraid what would happen if you do the right thing. Babar Sahib is not here with us, but I have to say that piece of advice always was with me and allowed me, I think, amongst many others, as Mashail spoke and others spoke, to have the confidence as well as to have the optimism that, with people like him championing ideals that some of us want to try to embrace, we can overcome big challenges. Now, I've spent 3 years leading our central bank, and I learned many things in that time. I learned many things about Pakistan that I did not know before. But I also saw a glimpse of how Pakistan rose and at a time when I think it was destined to collapse. And this was COVID. When in February of 2020, the world entered a global lockdown, and around the world, Spain, Italy, death rates were skyrocketing. When some of us who were in the public sector were thinking, what will happen to Pakistan? I think it was fear all around. It was fear. Pakistan, a 5th largest country in the world, a very poor country, more poor people in Pakistan than the entire population of Spain. People living in very congested spaces where viruses transmit very rapidly, very poor public health facilities. We could be a poster child for COVID's disaster on developing countries. And in the event, to me, perhaps the best takeaway from my 3 years is that the country pulled together at a time when it easily could have been a poster child for disaster. In 3 dimensions. Public health, for instance, if you look at the number of COVID cases per capita, number of COVID deaths per capita, or the positivity rate, Pakistan has consistently been a fraction of what the global average was. And even, deaths and number of COVID cases may be underreported, but a positivity ratio by definition is hard to underreport. And first was the public health dimension. The second was the human dimension. And one of our leaders, Dr. Sania Neshtar, who was in charge of the cash transfers program in Pakistan, led an unprecedented charge and managed to deliver a cash stipend to nearly 1 in 2 households in Pakistan. And the program that she and the government led was recognized by the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, as one of the biggest to have been mounted by a developing country, a targeted cash transfer program, and ended up, directly putting cash in the hands of households where around the country people were out of jobs. Third was the economic dimension. And I think with the inspiration and the support of people like Babar Ali Sahab and other businessmen, friends to council such as Osman, the central bank put together a number of new ways to support the industry, to protect jobs and to save lives. And we did many new things that had not been done in Pakistan before. There was a little bit of debate inside the central bank whether we should try new things, because as public civil servants, we are always taught, I realize you are taught never to try anything new, because people would say, if you fail, sir, then they're going to hang the noose around your neck. But if you only do what has been done before, you will never be criticized for not doing enough. But we took on a few things. I remember Babar Ali Sahab used to give good counsel at the time. And in the end, what was the result? Pakistan's growth rate, the last 2 years, around 5% of GDP, amongst the top third of all the countries for which the IMF publishes statistics. Pakistan debt to GDP ratio. Pakistan is amongst the few countries where it fell by 3 percentage points of GDP. Just by comparison, in the US, it rose by about 20 percentage points of GDP. In emerging markets, across the board, it rose by about 15 percentage points of GDP, and in Pakistan it fell. And finally, our foreign exchange reserves grew by about $7 billion over the same 2019 to 2021 period. So there is a lot that one feels Pakistan after 75 years is struggling with, that it needs to do more. But an experience like COVID, when Pakistan could have become a poster child for an unmitigated disaster, seeing it pull itself together and coming out as a country that, whether it's the health dimension or the poverty dimension through cash transfers, or the macroeconomic dimension, producing statistics that I think makes many Pakistanis proud, was a real good moment for me as a policymaker to see, at the 75 years after our independence. So I just wanted to briefly cover, I think, Pakistan's COVID journey, which for me is a personal journey, and I think a journey where I think Pakistan ended up doing reasonably well. So thank you for giving me the space to do that.
Thank you, Reza. So Reza stepped in at even shorter notice than Osman, because Osman was instructed to go find Reza and drag him out. So Reza, bari meherbani. Thank you very much for joining us. And Mukesh made sure that I mentioned the great class of '93, because we got 3 members on the screen and in the room from that Harvard class. So I thought we might just open it up for 5-10 minutes. We've got a industrialist art lover, and no, he's not a failed industrialist. He's quite a successful industrialist. There's false modesty, and a central banker and a political scientist. So I think this is as good an opportunity as any to ask. We might as well make hay while the sun shines. Anybody want to? I can ask endless questions, but I'd rather leave it open to the floor. Mukesh, not about the class of '93.
It's about the SAI. I think that.
Yeah.
Wonderful to see you guys again. So, just a tribute. 75 years later, the country's come together. It would be remiss for us not to mention Harvard's mission, the mission of the great convener. The convener. 30 years ago, I met Reza and Osman here on campus, and over the last 30 years, we've worked together for the betterment, I think, of India, Pakistan, and the world, whether it was dealing with biopharmaceuticals in Pakistan or Reza's work to bring Pakistan out of where they were sitting 3 years ago, which has been amazing. And they're both very humble with what they've done. But SAI makes that happen. So I just want to give the proper kudos to Harvard and SAI, because it's the work of the people that are in the room that really allow all of the people that do convene to go off and do what they do and to help one another. So I always tell people, there's no free lunch when you come here. The expectation is you're going to take what you get from here and do something, or you'll be contacted and voluntold to do something. So great to see you all.
Thank you, Mukesh, and I echo the sentiment. I think Prem has a question behind.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Prem Shankar Jha. I'm from India, and I was very actually excited to hear about your cash transfer scheme, and during the COVID, and I'd be very grateful if you would tell us a little more about it. The numbers who were involved and the amounts that were involved, because I know perfectly well that Pakistan has had financial and foreign exchange problems all these years, and I'm very glad to hear that you're coming out of them and that your GDP growth rate has shot up. But what I want to know is, I asked this because you may be aware that at least 7 top economists, Indian economists, including 2 Nobel Prize winners, begged the Modi government to start a cash transfer scheme, and to the best of my knowledge, he did not do so, at least certainly not in the beginning. There may have been something at the very end when I was not there. But so I would like to know how you did it and what kind of reactions you got from let's say your people in the central bank, because our central bank people are really ruled from Basel and from the inflation targeting things of Raghuram Rajan and people like that, and they don't have a brain in their heads, I'm sorry to say.
We'll strike that last phrase from the record. Yes, noted. Reza, over to you, I think.
Yeah, so let me answer the question, but just before that, can I just make one plug in the spirit of what Mukesh said about Harvard and how it brings us together, brought to me the great friendship that continues with Mukesh. One of my dreams that could not get fulfilled while I was governor was to start collaboration and exchange between the central banks of Pakistan and India. I had a conversation with Babar Ali Sahab about that as well. And I just want to mention a plug here, that if, for instance, the South Asia Institute can play any kind of a role in bringing together central bank governors, perhaps in the region, and that allows an umbrella, a sort of a non-political umbrella, where something like this happens, I think it would be great, because I'll tell you something. in February of 2020, when the whole world was collapsing, the only friends who I relied on was other central bank governors. And I would have loved to be able to have, the governor of the Central Bank of India also, that I'm able to speak with him as well as I was able to do so with many other governors. So let me answer the question. And I'll be speaking
Reza, 1 second before you go. So you were just volunteered for a SAI task in Mukesh's spirit. So when you come here, I will personally get all the central bankers, get on a call with all of you, who you know, but including Raghu and others, and we can kick it off. It's that easy. It's really not harder than that.
Wonderful. I think if you do that, Tarun, I think it'll be a great contribution.
I agree. It's fabulous. Why not? Let's do it. Okay, go ahead.
Absolutely. And central bank people are boring techie people, so hopefully no politician will be interested in what central banks do. But it's a great idea. I'd be happy to support it in whichever way I can. But let me answer the question. And I will be conveying to you information about the cash transfer program that was done by the Ministry of Poverty Reduction, led by our then Minister Sania Nishtar. So first, a few numbers. Pakistan has around 32 million households. There are about 5 people per household, roughly. And this program reached about 15 million of those households. The cash transfer per household was around 12,000 rupees. Currently, the exchange rate is about 200. May not seem that much, but this was targeted according to the means score of those people who were at sort of the bottom end of the distribution. How did it work? It employed digital technology in the following way. That the TV and the newspapers were blasted with advertisements that if you think you qualify for getting 12,000 rupees, text your national identity card number to this number. It was a 4-digit number, and you text your. Then in the background, the databases had been linked to each other to check, has this person made a foreign trip? For instance, if the person had made a foreign trip, he or she was out. Does that person own a motorcycle? If they did, they were out. Is that person an employee of the government? If they were out. Because the whole goal was to try to make this more targeted. And by a series of yes and no type questions, the ministry arrived upon these 15 million households that it was reasonably confident was a group that was well targeted. You may remember, during, in the US, there was a lot of controversy about some people and institutions benefiting from the programs that the US government gave for supporting businesses. And that's the worry on the mind of every, policymaker. So these were the steps that were done to try to make it more targeted and to try to get it towards those who are deserving of it. And I'll just mention one other thing to the person who asked the question, which is that at the central bank side, we came up with a novel policy measure, which was that we told all the banks that if you have a client that commits to not lay off a worker for 6 months, all right, and you'll need to certify that, then we, as in the central bank, will cover at a very concessional interest rate of 2 or 3 percentage points annualized the entire wage bill for the next 6 months of that client's employees. So what that ended up doing was it ended up protecting jobs for about 2 million people in the formal sector, which again, if you look in terms of number of households, then translates into around 10 million households where jobs are protected. And it prevented then businesses from shutting down and firing the labor, which then would have gone to the rural areas and would have spread COVID more. So it was a time to innovate. And I think we were lucky that we were able to do some things that helped put liquidity in the hands of people at the time.
And with your permission, if I may just add a little. So I think, the history of cash transfers in Pakistan actually predates COVID. So in July of 2008, the Benazir Income Support Program began, which by 2016, which itself had quite a robust history. So by 2016, it had about 5.5 million beneficiaries and was distributing about $1 billion. And with COVID and with Dr. Sania Nishta's leadership, it just went to another level. So the number of beneficiaries trebled. And as Reza mentioned, at a very difficult time, the base of the pyramid got unprecedented support.
Thank you, Osman. Thank you, Reza. Other questions? We have time for maybe, what do we have? One or maybe one more? One more question. Yeah, sorry. What are you saying, Salman?
We had one question come in online from actually Archon Basu, who's joining virtually, and he said, well done, Reza.
Right, that's another class of 93.
Yeah, there's...
This is a very parochial group.
Archon said, well done to everyone. Thanks for joining, and great to see everyone there. What lessons can be shared with other central bankers? Which sounds like we have another event coming up on that, but maybe there's any final words on the topic.
The first lesson, I think, for central bankers, and you must recognize that central bankers, I think, by training and by fear, are very, very conservative, cautious people. I think the first lesson is the importance of having to innovate. I am convinced that if we and my colleagues had not put together an environment inside the central bank where we felt we could innovate, we would not have been able to support the businesses as well. Simply reducing interest rates would not have delivered the kind of liquidity that we needed. For instance, we had another program called TERF, Temporary Economic Refinance Facility, which gave very concessional funding to any very businessman who was going to import machinery or buy machinery to start a new business. So my first message would be that central bankers need to also think of themselves as innovators. My second message would be that central bankers, I think COVID shows that you need to not only be a regulator, you need to be an enabler. By that, I mean that we pushed digitization. We took full advantage of COVID to push digitization to a whole new level. This cash transfer program relied on banks making sure that they have the infrastructure available to distribute this money. Banks were being tricky, but we made sure we used our regulatory powers to make sure that they were there to deliver exactly what the Ministry of Poverty Reduction needed for the cash transfers. But we also used this opportunity that we ourselves become the enablers of digitization. It was not enough to create a framework whereby somebody can open a bank account remotely without having to visit a bank branch, but we started weekly monitoring of the number of accounts that banks were opening, particularly of underserved people, so that the regulated entities, the commercial banks, see that the central bank is not only a regulator, but it's also an enabler and a promoter of areas which are vital for promoting inclusion in the country and which are vital for saving the people from the impact of COVID. So one, innovate, and number two, think of yourself as enablers as well as regulators.
I see we have one more crisp question from Marty. Yeah, Marty, go ahead.
Just to say, I work at the bottom of the pyramid or the base in the informal economy, and the shock of COVID is very long lasting, and they're in a deep hole. So another cash transfer for recovery is really sorely needed. And we have evidence from around the world on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. So with that, and I'm conscious of time since we have to move on to our next panel. Mashail, Osman, Reza, thank you so much at short notice for adapting.
Thank you.
And on Reza's point, I would just echo Babar Saab's comments, which I read out, that there's so much to learn from sharing expertise across the region. We've seen that in the arts, we've seen that in the sciences, we've seen that in the social sciences. And that, in a sense, is what we're trying to do with this little cabal of people that is not so little anymore, thanks to the efforts of so many in this room.